Hello and welcome to the weekly MG EVs podcast, streaming live today on Monday, the 10th of May, 2021. We're hoping to talk to you about MG electric vehicles, current and speculative, hoping to inform and entertain you for about an hour or so. I'm Dave Stewart, username Dave S on the forum, and joining me on tonight's episode are MG EV owners John Griffiths.
Hi everybody, John Griff on the forum.
Michael Fisher.
Hi. On the username, on the forum, my username is Fisher2B.
And Stuart Whitman.
Hi, evening all. It's Stu Whit 46 on the forum.
And from North Yorkshire, the Innovations Development Manager at the Charlie Group, Miles Roberts.
Miles per kilowatt hour on the forum.
Thanks. And John, you didn't say from just outside Oslo this week, so they're presuming now you've moved.
I've learnt my lesson. Near Oslo.
If you're watching live, thank you for joining us, and please click on the like button and say hello in the chat window. And Mike will be looking at the chat window during the podcast and picking up on some of the salient points. If you're watching later, thank you for choosing to watch the video, and please subscribe and get a notification when we go live the next time. Just before we start, can I hand over to Miles, who would like to give us some sad news regarding one of the MG management team. Miles.
Yeah, so really sorry to have to say this. Daniel Gregorious, who is the head of sales and marketing at MG Motors UK, passed away last Monday. After a short but aggressive battle with pancreatic cancer. Daniel was instrumental in the launch of the EV products for MG in the UK. He had a fantastic enthusiasm for life, and he will be sorely missed. He was approachable, helpful, funny, friendly guy. We don't often find that in management circles within motor manufacturers. And I'll miss him. He was really good. He was really useful for me when we've been doing this podcast. You know, if I had any questions and wanted some background information, he was often as open as he could be in that way about what was coming up in terms of products and things. But on the whole, what I remember about Dan was that no matter what happened, you know, overnight, no matter what drunken shenanigans we got up to at the MG conference, the following morning, he'd be bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, gone for a run already at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you know, woke up. And when he came into the room, he was already like an excited puppy waiting to have a chat, whilst you're nursing a hangover and thinking, how on earth does he do it? Our love obviously goes to his family and friends. We will miss him, and we wish them all the very best, and our condolences go out to them all.
Our thoughts go out to his friends and family. Thanks, Miles. Thank you. Tonight in this podcast, we're going to look at 4 or 5 things. We're going to speak about, now I've been calling it the Cyberstar, and I've just been corrected, it's a Cyberster. So we had some speculation about it last week, but there seems to be some chat specifically about that. We're going to look at MG sales from Norway, and John's been doing some homework there for us. We're also going to look at what made you buy the MG and what research did you do before you bought it, and what car did you replace? If we've got a good stream going on that. So to kick off, there are some we said 2 weeks ago. Absolutely fantastic pictures have been posted, but there's a bit of activity. Certainly, it looks like crowdfunding is happening. Does anybody know a bit more than I do about this?
Yeah, so basically MG brought out this Cyberster, how do you say it? Sounds the same to me. This concept car at the Shanghai Auto Show, and they said that if they got enough people basically putting their name down for one and saying that they would be keen to have one, then they would see about putting it into production. So I think they need like 5,000 people to basically be hand raised and say they'll put down I think was it $500, something like that. It was,
It was £150, I think it worked out.
£150. So yeah, not a great deal of money. So it's not crowdfunding in the sort of Kickstarter sense. It's not something that's literally needed to fund it, but I suppose it's a proof that people are actually willing to, let's say, to be hand raisers and say, yeah, I'd go for that. So they've reached that target. Now, there's no word on when the production model is going to arrive, if indeed it does in the UK. One of the conversations I had earlier was with somebody from MG who said that part of the problem they've got now is that left-hand drive cars and right-hand drive cars need separate homologation. And in addition to that, homologation that's been done in the UK is no longer valid in Europe because of Brexit. So there's a lot of cars that have had to re-homologate because for the European market because they were previously homologated here in the UK. And the costs, obviously, of that mean that, as well as the cost of physically converting the car from left to right and drive, the homologation costs on top of that might mean that they have to choose their markets wisely. Now, convertibles in the UK, there's more convertibles sold in the UK every year than there are in Germany, France, and Spain combined. Despite our horrendous weather, we seem to have this infatuation with the fact that, I think it's the optimism, the fact that it may be sunshining for about half an hour next Thursday. Let's get a convertible just in case. And so they do tend to sell a lot of convertibles here. But they don't, the Nordic market, I imagine, isn't particularly strong on convertibles. You like your estates, you like your SUVs, but convertibles not so much, perhaps, and certainly not in a volume. And likewise, Australia and New Zealand don't tend to go for convertibles particularly. So you've just got to choose your market and work out. The biggest market for MG at the moment is India, and they don't buy convertibles. So that's, I think, why they did the hand raiser thing, because they said, well, there's no point in us building it if nobody wants it. What I suspect may happen is that they'll do similar to what a couple of other manufacturers have done. So, for example, the Mazda MX-5 is available as a hardtop in some regions. And I don't mean just like a removable hardtop, I mean as a physical coupe type car. And I think that MG might do something similar. So they do a convertible for the UK, but they do a hardtop or coupe version for the rest of the world. Or make both available in the UK. I don't know. But at the moment, we don't have any timings on that. I'd like to think that within 2 years, we'll see that car on the streets. It might not be on the streets of Britain at the moment, but I think we will see it, on sale in its home market, certainly.
I think the most encouraging thing from MG was the speed with which the 5,000 people put their hands up, because what I read, the link I sent out, was that they were going to keep it open until the 31st of July. And they've already got the 5,000 that was closed last week or the week before, if I understand correctly. So,
yeah, it looks like it's been phenomenally received. I think people, to be fair, it looks great, so I think that it's people who, again, it's one thing to be a hand raiser and say, yes, I'd be interested for £150. It's another thing to say, yes, I'm going to spend £45,000 or whatever it would cost on it, So we'll see how it develops. Certainly I'd be very keen to have one on my driveway.
Yeah, obviously, what I'm going to say, Miles. I'll have it if it's in white.
Is that the cheaper paint color? Is that, if red was free color, would you have
unless they do a Tesla and metallic white is a no-cost option, but black and the other colors, plain black, it will cost you extra. So,
yeah, I say it looks great as a car. It'll be toned down, no doubt, for production. But we'll see how things develop with that. It looks great.
So I think we're all pretty keen on getting one of those, even just to hire it for the day and, as you say, leave it in the drive. Pretty impressive. And are you hearing any more whispers? Are there anything else in the pipeline at all, Miles, or are you in your lips field? Or?
There's a B segment, so sort of Corsa-sized electric vehicle due at the very end of this year, start of next year. So that's so similar to the MG3, but on a completely new platform with a pure EV drivetrain. So that's going to be interesting. That should be good. No news at the moment about battery sizes or range or anything like that. But yeah, hopefully that should be out end of this year. And in terms of other cars at the moment, no news. Again, I think the issue with MG5 facelift that's been announced in Europe, and we've not said yet if it's coming to the UK, part of that is down to that homologation issue about it needing to be homologated separately for UK for the right-hand drive market. So, that's all I know at the moment.
Okay.
Is there an equivalent Rowe vehicle of that that fits that small B segment car?
Potentially. I'll be honest, I haven't done much internet digging. I do, however, last March, so just over a year or so ago, 14 months ago, just before lockdown, I went to a design meeting with a couple of other dealerships, and Carl Gotham, the head of the design department here in Sake Design in UK, where they showed us some sketches of potential styles for the B segment EV, of where, different design directions they could go in, and just getting feedback on what we thought of this. And I say there were design sketches. They were, more concept car-y than concept cars in a way. But there were certain design elements that, we fed back that we liked those elements, that perhaps, and like there was different interior options of, and they all looked pretty damn good, to be fair, so, and they weren't copying any other cars that were on the market. They weren't, some people would say that the ZS EV looks a bit like a Mazda. Well, this wasn't the case with any of these sketches. They all looked like completely fresh designs, some of which were more led by the Rowe Marvel R type styling, and some which were more towards where the Cyberster is. So varieties of, but how that comes to production depends on costs, I suppose, and everything else. But no, it was interesting to be part of that process.
Great. Mike, is there anything on the chat boards about new models or anything in new?
First one is any news on the MG5 roof rails? I heard it might have been signed off. Is that true?
I believe it's been signed off, and it's 35 kilos. And apparently they're writing to all the owners with information on that, and to send out an update to the user manual as an addendum to show that they are capable of having that. But in terms of when, I don't know. It's in the hands of MG, not myself, unfortunately. So when they've got somebody to lick all the envelopes and stick the stamps on, I guess.
No problem. And David Clark Bell asks, what about the MG ZSEV infotainment system, maps, etc.? Any comfort-free update in the works?
I spoke to an MG engineer the other day about the infotainment system generally, and about perhaps it being laggy in certain scenarios, and people saying that it sometimes little bugs, like, for example, the overlay coming on top of the reversing camera that I've had once or twice, or what else was there? The
MG logo.
Oh, yeah, the MG, like, it just crashing, just like restarting itself or crashing or whatever. So I spoke to engineers about that, and it is being worked on at the moment. In they're trying to improve the system. They're trying to do a software update if they can to improve it, to make it less laggy, to make it less buggy. And that will get rolled out as and when they do. But I believe that that center console infotainment system is outsourced effectively. It's another company outside of MG that makes that software. So they need to work in conjunction with them to get any updates done. So
Yeah, I had a strange one today. It just completely blanked out. Couldn't tell if I had radio, anything on. Couldn't tell if I had air conditioning on. And it just went blank. So I just powered down and powered back up again, and it cleared it. So first time I've ever seen that.
I think that generally it seems to work quite well, but I must admit the lagginess of changing the temperature or changing the fan speed.
You turn the fan speed, and then about 3 or 4 seconds later, it's
that I'd like to. That for me is more of a priority fix than anything else, because you're taking your eyes off the road for too long to see where you are. That perhaps could have been fixed by putting something on the dial to show you where you were. But
yes.
That's a bit. It's become a bit irritating, I must admit.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for those updates, Miles. That's super. Anything else fresh in, Mike?
Fully charged coverage from the Shanghai show had lots of small medium EVs from SIAC. Could those be rebadged with MG on and brought over? Asked Barry.
Probably, yeah. I'll be honest, I haven't actually watched the fully charged videos from Shanghai. It's in my watch later list on YouTube, and I just haven't had time really. But the in terms of badge engineering, another small medium EV from SAIC, very likely. In terms of putting what they were saying to us was that they had a B segment EV platform ready to go. They just wanted to do the design of the body on top of it effectively. They've got the skateboard, with the battery and everything ready to go. So that's probably coming from another model. It just won't share many, if any, body panels with it. I think they're going to try and make it look more MG.
There was a video about the Marvel R where they showed the Rowe version of it, and a guy there went through it and said what would be different for the European launch. One of the things was the performance. There was a significant hike in the performance, 0 to 100 time for the European version compared to the version that Rowe had in China. Sort of just under 5 seconds for 0 to 100 on the MG Marvel R.
I see Jeff Cartwright's responded that he had the black screen of death. I don't think I put it quite as dramatically as that, but yes, it was a little bit inconvenient. But thanks for that. Great, we'll move on now. And John, you've been doing a wee bit of homework for us about MG sales and other news from Norway. Do you want to pick up on some of the stuff you've brought?
Yeah, what we have here is every month they release the registrations for all the various cars. And if I remember correctly, last month it was 54% electric sales. It was like only 6 or 7% fossil sales. The rest of them were plug-in hybrids. Yeah. Certainly at this part of the world, there's still plenty to choose from. And last month, for example, it was really the ID4 was the one that came out of the out of the gate, and they pushed out 1,824 vehicles registered in April. And for April, when it's only been on sale for 2 months, they've registered 2,684. Whereas the MG we're down to, unfortunately, 187 for April, but year to date, 1,047, which puts MG ZSEV 10th in the ranking in Norway as far as all cars that have been sold. So it's above Volvo. It sold they sold more cars than Volvo XC60 last month, but it's getting a bit tighter over here. The year-end total for 20 for MG ZSEV was 3,720. So if they continue at the rate they're going at the moment, they will just about get above. They might do 4,000 cars for the year. But I would imagine what they're aching for is to get the Marvel R out. And if the pricing of that is competitive, and certainly that could cause cause the numbers to go up. But what they've done over here is they're offering 0.9 interest It was supposed to be only for the month of April, but the website's not been updated. So I think when we got ours, it was 1.99%. So, but again, there aren't many for sale. If you consider they've sold over 4,000, nearly 5,000 cars in Norway, there are only 90 plus, yeah, there were under 100 used ones for sale on what we call fin.no, which is the sort of car hub for selling. And a lot of those were adverts were for new cars. So the resale value is holding up remarkably well. You're only looking at perhaps £2,000 to £3,000 of loss in a year on your car compared to today's prices. So whether they will try to be a bit more competitive with the pricing, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see what happens next month. I think what I found interesting was that, was it Michael put up, wanted to talk a little bit about it as well, the poll where people had plugged in the amount of mileage that they would be interested in seeing if they were going to go for an EV. And I think 32%, if I remember correctly, were in the range, which was slightly above what the MG ZS can do. So if there was a facelift and it came out with a slightly bigger battery and the app, I think that could have a serious impact on increasing the sales of the car if they could maintain the price as it is, but increase the range. Interesting enough, there's a very active MG ZS EV Facebook group in Norway, and somebody put a post up, I think last week, where they asked why should they buy one, and they'd read about BMS problems and other things, and there've been over 90 posts, over 90, probably 100 now, of people, praising it from here to eternity and saying, oh, don't worry about a little bit of software, everything can go wrong. But that I found quite significant when so many people responded to a Facebook post. So I think one interesting stat, I think, is that MG sold more cars since January to April than Ford in Norway. Ford sold only 514 cars totally up to the end of April, and MG sold 1,047 ZS EVs alone. So those numbers are a bit skewed because they're going to start pumping out marquees, Mustang marquees by the hundreds in the next 2 months. So as they've got that out of the way, but pretty reasonable numbers. Just give you a few more. Polestar 2, they've sold 1,730 up to the end of April. And yet something like the e-tron is absolutely crazy when you consider the price, 2,380 cars up to the end of April, which is an astonishing number. And the other big hitter has been the Volvo XC40, the Recharge. They've sold 2,863 up to the end of April. So not Tesla, I think I sent a note to Stuart about it. They only sold 4 in April, Tesla Model 3s, because what they do is they time everything to the end of the quarter. So January to April sales were 2,500, and I think in March they pushed out around about 2,300 cars. So that's the reason why Tesla's registrations go up and down like a roller coaster. Yeah. But anyway, I'll come back to that. I mean, perhaps make it something we do each month, as long as the numbers for MG stay up where they should be. Yeah. So top 10 at the moment, just inside number 10 for the time being.
Are there no MG5s in Norway at all then?
No, that won't be released until October. Found a bit surprising because I'm still trying to find out if the launch date of the Marvel R is going to be made. There's not been any. The website for Europe doesn't talk about it any longer, the release date or launch date, but there are a couple of dealers who have gone out with their website, which is updated, that said launch date is May. So hopefully we're going to get some pricing numbers out of MG, but it may well be that they're looking at the market, because if they're going to try and hit the right point, they're going to have to pound the sharpen the pencils and come with a price that undercuts the mainstream, like the ID4 and the ENIAC, with the again, it's four-wheel drive, of course, which everybody wants. But when I look at the number of ID4s that have been registered, and this country is crazy about 4x4s, I got quite a shock when I saw there's 2,700 that are only two-wheel drive. So that could be a big benefit for the Marvel R. So let's see what happens. The other thing that happened here was that NIO announced its launch of Norway as its first European market last week with a live video, and they are certainly throwing some money at it. They've going to open a NIO space in the centre of Oslo, right across from the Parliament building, in a very prestigious building with a huge amount of space. I think it's 1,700 square meters or something. And they're going to run an organization a bit like Tesla, but that's a vehicle only bringing one in at the moment, the S8, which is this huge 5-meter long SUV, which will go head to head with things like the e-tron and the Model X. So that's a different level compared to where MG is. But I do believe the Marvel R priced correctly could create a big dint in other companies' sales targets when it comes out with the spec that is promised.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of things come out of what you were saying there, John, and maybe right or wrong, Michael will help me out here. That forum is still open, isn't it, Michael, about what were your expectations of mileage?
Yeah, so the poll's still on YouTube in the community tab. I ticked 150 miles because I can pretty much, with 150 miles, that will cover me for 4 days worth of daily commuting. It's only the trips to London, which are few and far between at the moment, and I would only do it like twice a year. Would I need longer range? But there is a 3% which have said I need more than 300 miles, which if you're traveling at 70, that's over 4 hours of continuous driving, which wouldn't be safe.
I suppose the issue is for most people is that if you're used to having a petrol car which you fill up, once a month or whatever, and it's really easy for us that have made the switch and have the ability to charge at home to go, yeah, I never need more than 150 miles because I can charge it over, charging 6 hours overnight and it's got 150 miles and that lasts me a week. But the truth is that there's an awful lot of people out there who live in terrace houses who don't have access to home chargers. So if they're thinking, I'm going to need to go visit a rapid charger to put my charge in because I haven't got a charger at work, I haven't got a charger at home, they're relying on a rapid charger. They're thinking, I don't want to be visiting any more often than I do for petrol, really. So I want to be sort of, putting a good couple of 100 miles in at a go, because it might be that, it's going to take me, an hour and a half, 2 hours extra in my week to go do that compared to what I would normally do in a petrol station. And I live in quite an affluent town in Yorkshire. There's a lot of terraced houses still. There's an awful lot of really big, expensive houses with no off-road parking still. And there's some houses opposite my son's school, which are, it's a very big Victorian terraces. They've got no off-road parking at all, and each house is worth sort of £700,000 plus. And you think, these are affluent people who are able to live in very big houses, and they clearly do, but they just still don't have the facility to be able to charge their car at home with the current infrastructure that's in place. So I think that's why they'd be looking, those people probably would be more likely to go for a Tesla or something like that, something with 300 miles plus range, because then they're able to charge at one of the 3 rapid chargers that's in Skipton. And yes, it's not going to cost them an awful lot less than charging than if they were filling with petrol. If they're paying 35 pence per kilowatt hour at the local rapid charger, it's not going to be a cost saving particularly. But there potentially might be a solution there. But in terms of, looking at a car which has 150 miles range, for some of those people, it's just not an option. And then there's also the people who, somebody said on the forum on Facebook the other day on one of the electric vehicle groups, said, why can't I get why can't all these people move to electric vehicles? I'm paying £200 a month in fuel. Well, you're not necessarily, paying £200 a month in fuel doesn't guarantee that you're going to be able to be accepted on a £300 pounds a month PCP agreement, for example, or a contract hire. So there is, I think, there's a big gap opening up almost in terms of equality, and that, you know, that those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to make the leap to EV at the moment, and those who, you know, there isn't a selection of used cars at a cost-effective price for them. They haven't reached the sort of, you know, couple of grand sort of mark that people can sort of think, you know, that they might be able to stretch to if they're buying cars to run into the ground. And there isn't the infrastructure there either for people who don't have off-road parking. So I can see why people would put, you know, over 300 miles range based on, you know, the difficulty they may have in charging if they don't have access off-road. Yeah, if you've got a driveway at home and you can charge at home, the chance of me doing a journey that's over 300 miles without needing to stop is very, very minimal. I think that's people are thinking about, you know, time between charging may be extended compared to what we're used to as electric car drivers and owners.
It's very much horses for courses. What do you want the car for, and you know, how many miles? I bumped into a guy in Aberdeen last week, and he had exactly the same car, white paint, miles by the way, and I very chirpily said to him, "Oh, how are you getting on with the ZSEV?" I won't repeat what he immediately said, but he was living down in Edinburgh, working a lot in Aberdeen and Peterhead, and he was doing a lot of motorway driving all the way up the east coast of Scotland. And he was saying, you know, sitting at 70, he wasn't getting much more than 80, 90 miles for a journey. So it really didn't suit him. He wasn't very happy with it at all. But that's one thing I'm noticing, and taking on the point. Thank you, John, for doing that research for us. I'm seeing a lot more, particularly ZSEVs about now. I pulled into a car park today, and again there was another white one. Miles, you may have a point here. All Scotland's got her white ones, but and this guy had tinted his back windows, so I was having a good close look at this car. So, but there are, I won't put you on the spot and ask you for stats, Miles, but your MG must be quite pleased with the overall sales levels, are there?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's been a stonking year for considering lockdown and everything else. MG sales grew year on year. Part of the reason for that is that the MG5, of course, was launched. So whereas in Norway you've just got the ZSEV to set up for the MG to sell, over here we've got a couple of cars which are fully electric. So the MG5s are selling very well. My black demonstrator that I was driving has been sold this last week finally, so I'm getting a new car as of tomorrow, I think. So MG5s, I think we're selling a few a week. So I won't go into, you know, exactly. I think you know, we're selling sort of as a group over 2 sites, probably sort of one a day, which is reasonable, you know, for what we'd expect for any model of car, you know, really. So sales are buoyant at the moment. We're getting an awful lot of inquiries about electric vehicles generally. There's a lot of people who are, I think, are more strongly considering an EV, and I'm keen to find out more. We haven't got quite as many people putting negative comments on our Facebook adverts and things like that as we used to when it was the original Nissan Leaf. It does help that the cars look better than the original Leaf. But the overall, I think that, you know, the conversation's moved on. It's not, and for all of its issues, companies like TV programs like This Morning with Phil and Holly, they were talking about electric cars, and it's that sort of conversation in the mainstream. It could pick massive holes throughout a lot of what they were reporting. It was very, very quality research. But in terms of actually having the conversation about electric cars, and you know, speaking to people and talking as if it's normal, and it is that normalizing that you need, you know, in order for it to move from us early adopters, and we are still early adopters even at this stage. I think that it needs to move on to the mainstream. It needs more investment in terms of infrastructure. It needs more more people to accept that they may be charging at work during the day as an option. If people have terraced houses, for example, so it needs more infrastructure to go in at workplaces, and it needs more support from governments to be able to do that, because I think that at the moment, employees are sort of saying, well, we'd happily put them in, but, coming off the back of a fairly crap year in terms of the pandemic and everything, we could do with a bit more support in it. And if it's even if it's some sort of financing or tax breaks that they could put in, there are some tax breaks in the UK now for capital investment projects that was brought in the last budget. So that might be able to be used to install more chargers. It's certainly something we're looking at as a business, is whether we can use that capital allowance to install things like infrastructure, like chargers and things. Perhaps solar panels, we could maybe look at putting those on our showrooms too. And if we can get a capital allowance against it, then great.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest issues we've talked about before is the charging infrastructure, and I can certainly see the problem. We have a fair number of flats in Oslo, and if there's no garages there, but it's difficult. But I think for the majority of people, and this is something that MG's got to do, got to improve the charging speed. So the less time I'm going to sit at a charger, the smaller amount of range I can go with. So probably in the UK, if you're not completely price orientated and looking at the MG as a bigger car, then I don't know what they've done with the Model Model 3. But in Norway, they knocked £4,000, £3,500, £4,000 off it, and brought it down to equivalent of around about £32,000 now. And there you're getting a range of 280 miles for the rear-wheel drive version only. So I think you've got to try and find the balance between what you're prepared to pay, and at the moment, the ZS EV is still the best value for money car on the market. And yes, got pluses and you've got minuses, but you've just got to live with the range. But and obviously winter, regardless of which car it is, you're going to lose range. So that education of newcomers to this market needs to be handled quite carefully. But certainly it's the infrastructure that needs to be boosted and beefed up. And then, can we get 80 kilowatts an hour as a charging rate in the summer for the car behind me?
Yeah. So certainly, I know there's a company making curbside chargers and things, and that might be something we should look at for a topic for subsequent podcasts. But could I just remind everybody, if you haven't done that forum survey, please just click on it and I'll give us some really good feedback. Mike, is there folk commenting on anything there?
Yes. David Clark Bell asks, will there be possibly another BMS update to increase the charging speed of the ZS or even 5? Charging speeds are now more important than ever at charging stations, especially with lots of EVs in his area. Miles, do you know or no?
I mean, it's something they're always trying to improve. The latest BMS obviously update that they put on dropped the voltage overall. That is having a slight improvement in rapid charger speeds. I know that one of Jake, who's on the chat somewhere, he said that he got 48 kilowatts on the way back from a drive out yesterday at a 50 kilowatt charger, which normally he's found has only topped out at around sort of 30 odd. But he'd done a longish journey and it was 15 degrees outside, and so the battery was significantly warmer from it was a week or two ago when it was quite a bit chillier. Mm-hmm. In terms of the BMS being changed to improve charging speeds, I imagine that it's probably something they are working on. It's one of those things that also some of it depends on how good the software is on the charger. I know there's been some chat in the group here about polar chargers booting the car off at 75% charged. I don't have an answer for that as to why that happens. It needs reporting to Polar really, because it only seems to happen on their chargers. It doesn't happen on others. So I think that it sounds very much like it's a problem with their software, and it is probably just a software issue with their chargers, that there's something that happens at 75% in the MG, whether it's the BMS is telling the car that the charger that it needs to throttle back the charge rate somewhat, and that's throwing some sort of fault on the polar chargers. I don't know, but it's very likely to be a software related issue. But
am I right in thinking all rapid chargers, once they get to 80%, slow down the speed of delivery?
it's not the charger, it's the car that takes that.
All right.
So the car will control the charging rate to some extent based on the temperature of the pack, the capacity that it's charged to, and one of the things that you'll see in the MGZS, for example, is that it'll if it's a warm day and if the pack's warm and you're starting from a low state of charge. I peaked at 82 kilowatts in the ZS EV, but I was down at like 8%, which is at the point where the car's flashing at you, telling you charge now, charge now. So not many people are going to get the pack that low, because it warns you when you've got about 25% charge left. And it was peaked about 82 kilowatts up to about 20%. Then it dropped down to 60 kilowatts, which it held to about 50 or 60%, I think. And then it dropped down to 40 kilowatts until 80%. And then it dropped down again. At 95%, it dropped down to about 7 kilowatts, and you might as well, just take it home and run it on a home charger. So it's sort of like a stepped charging profile, if you will. If it's very low state of charge and it's one battery, it'll be charging fast, but then as it gets fuller, it'll drop down, then it'll drop down, it'll drop down again. The MG5, I've managed, again, 80 kilowatts on a Ionity charger in the MG5. And again, it holds that rate pretty well. It drops down to about, at 60%, it drops down to 60 kilowatts, and then at 80%, it drops down to 22 kilowatts, I think, in that. So it still maintains a good charge speed, but it does require a warm battery pack. So ideally, you'd want to drive on the motorway for a couple of hours, effectively use the battery quite quickly, which warms the pack up, and then charge again. If you're eking it out and you're driving slowly on country roads, and the worst thing you can do probably is to go to a rapid charger first thing in the morning, having forgotten to charge overnight, and sit there because the car will have cooled down loads overnight. So you've got a cold battery pack, and then you're going to go to a charger with a very cold pack, and it's got to heat the pack up as it charges, and then it's only probably once it's got to about 50% that there'll be enough temperature for it to actually start charging faster. But by that point, when you get to 60%, it's got to slow down again. So,
Miles, are you able, through any of your contacts, to find out what the optimal temperature is for the pack at, for example, let's say 15 or 20% SOC?
I can probably find out what they think is I've been trying to find out what the criteria are for the different charging, because there must be a logic thing where it says if pack temperature is greater than 20 degrees centigrade but less than 30 degrees, then between this percentage and this percentage, give this value.
Right.
There must be some sort of table out there, but I haven't been able to find it. And it's what we have it now, where you'll plug in, if it's a warm day, it'll perhaps charge part of it, where it charged the MG5 to about 50%, and then I could actually hear the cooling system for the battery kick in. Yeah. So it must have got to about 35 degrees for that to happen. So it's difficult to. The trouble is, there's no gauge on the car showing you what the battery.
The reason I ask, I've been using this ZS EV app, the one from Ireland, and of course that's showing the battery temperature. And this morning outside, it was the pack was showing 12 degrees, and I put the car on charge, and it went up to 14 within about 40 minutes, 35 minutes. It's been horribly cold here. It's been plus 5-6 degrees, and the car had been standing outside all night. But it would be nice to know, if you got to 20, do you get within 80% of that range? But
from my own driving experience, I would say that on a warm day, when you've been driving a fair distance and you get with a low state charge, that's when I've got my 80 kilowatts. So yeah, so that's, that would work. That would fit with what I've seen. I haven't seen 80 kilowatts when I've done a short journey or when it's been less than 20 degrees outside. So I imagine that 20 degrees is a fairly useful number.
Right.
Stuart, you're measuring it in exactly the same way as I am, aren't you?
All these figures just blow my mind.
That's incredible.
You know what? It is a problem because you're starting to get a more savvy user base out there, And if I turn up at the supercharger, do I go to a 50 kilowatt and pay a lower rate, or can I go to a 75 or 150 kilowatt charger and pay the extra? But there's no point in plugging in and finding out I'm only getting 35 or 40 kilowatts, and I could just as well have plugged into a 50 kilowatt charger. So I think, there's the price point here, and also trying to plan for how long you think you need to charge for, yeah?
Yeah.
So I was lost in the KWs there and the figures. So with the G5 that I have, if I was to go on to a 150 kilowatt charger, would it work?
It would work, but it would charge to a maximum set by the car, which is around 80 kilowatts.
Right. Oh, okay. So I didn't know that. So that's useful.
But it also depends on, I say, the pack temperature and the state of charge.
Yeah.
So if you were to pull up to 150 kilowatt charger and plug in when it's 5 degrees outside and you've got 50% battery left, you probably find you're only getting 20 or 30 kilowatts of power from it anyway.
Right.
Because the car's going to limit that.
Yeah.
If it's if you get there with a really low battery, I drove down to Peterborough, that was 150 miles, I think it was, in an MG5 in January, February time, so it was really cold weather as well. And I got to Peterborough, I went to the Ionity, and I think I had 25% left in the MG5. But because I've been driving for a couple of hours, the battery had warmed up, and so I was getting sort of 60 kilowatts charge speed out of the Ionity charger, which is not bad, I think, for January for cold weather, and for the state of charge not being above 20% anyway. But consequently, but same thing, I've been to a charger when I've only done a short distance. Example, a car was, I picked up a car from work. It had not been charged at work the night before. I needed to do a long journey, and I had to go to a rapid charger to charge it before I could do my journey. And I was sat there for over an hour waiting for it to charge up because the battery was cold and I'd not done any mileage in it to warm the battery up. So it was charging at around 30 kilowatts.
Okay.
Okay.
There is actually Fastned in the Netherlands have updated 4 days ago their charge curve for every electric vehicle, and they're saying that they got a charge speed of up to 76 kilowatts on their 150 kilowatt chargers, but it tapers off, and they're talking about optimal conditions with around 30 Celsius.
Yeah, I see one or two things about battery heaters, etc., on the chat, Mike, but we'll come back to that because we're just about to move on to the next topic, and that will probably pick up on that. The next topic is about how much research we did before we bought our EV, and this was brought to light by member Peter Cresswell, saying that he was so disappointed with the range in this MG that he sold it and gone back to an ICE car, and his thread is returned to the dark side. I think we've just said it earlier there. One of the main things I looked at, well, other than the baubles and bangles, what was I getting my existing car and what was I going to get in the MG? I actually sat down and did a bit of work and realised that I only had a daily big journey of 200, 250 miles about once every 4 to 6 weeks. And I could accommodate that. And then lockdown came and I certainly had no call for that much at all. So that gave me a lot of comfort before I bought it. And certainly I know I've got to do a bit more planning about en route charging. But what sort of things did you all look at? Stuart, I think you previously said you didn't do a hell of a lot of research, didn't you?
I think I did less than you, Dave. By your description, mine was just literally wanted to get into an EV because I like new tech, I guess. decided to spend the money, which was around about, I usually spend about 25k on an ICE car. The MG5 was the only estate car which I needed that fitted into that price bracket. And all I had was the 200-mile range, and that was the selling point for me. So then straight into a dealer, ordered it after a test drive, and that was that. Not realizing anything about, I didn't research temperature, I didn't research charging, where you can charge. I just wanted to get it, and it was feet first and then learn later.
I think I did a wee bit more research than that, Stuart. You do me a disservice. But yeah, I obviously up in the north of Scotland where I am, that was one of the comforts I need to know. I need to know I could travel to a nearby town and I would have a decent way of getting charged, etc., which was useful. But no, Mike, you'll have done heaps of research.
I did loads of research. So basically, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos. I was thinking of a Nissan Leaf, but I just couldn't afford it. And then it started to trickle through during November and December of 2019. But there's MG's bringing out a new car. It's going to be cheap and affordable. And when I heard the price, I was like, cool, I'm going to try and get one. I basically put my money down in late January, early February, and then picked it up late February. But yeah, I watched all of Tesla Braun's videos on it, but he had the Thailand model, so the infotainment system's slightly different with ours. And also I saw a couple of videos from Mike Proctor as well over the comparisons, and I just went, yeah, I need to get it. At the time, there wasn't really much studies on what the real world range was, but I took into assumption that the WLTP range was not going to be perfectly accurate, and I knew I could easily do 2 or 3 days, which on a charge, which I'm now realizing I can actually do 4, maybe even 5 if I'm eco driving, but nah, I don't like eco driving, so it's normally 4 days.
Mm-hmm. Oh well. And John, you're quite an experienced EV driver, aren't you?
Yeah, it's cost me a lot of money to find out, but no, we've got our car as my wife's second car. She was driving a CX-3 Mazda before this, and wanted 4-wheel drive on that. So I managed to convince her that this was a better buy. And we don't need the range that you guys are talking about, because we're only using it for driving around town and journeys of up to maybe 25 kilometers each way, max. So, but it's for our lifestyle, it's an ideal car for the second car to keep the costs down. The idea of going to one car for her was I'll divorce you before I lose my car, So at the end of the day here, it was price, but also kicked the wheels a lot and had a look at it, and it was the quality feeling of the car for the money that was involved. And of course the range is acceptable. Stuart's made a good point in the chat here about the WLTP thing. If you've got a very light foot and it is 25 degrees out there and the road is flat, you're not on the motorway, then you will get the WLTP. But it's really an understanding that it will be, as Stuart says, 10 to 20% less in the summer, and it could be up to 50% less in the winter. So if you are going to choose something and you've got a trip where you do need to go 100 miles one way and 100 miles the other way, and you don't want to charge, then yes, you've got a problem. And that's really, how can I say, adjusting the way you are and your lifestyle and your driving habits is a very big part of the decision in getting an electric car. But obviously, if you want to charge, you can charge and you can still get to your destination. It's just going to take you a bit longer. What's the price difference to go from something like the ID3 or the Tesla, if that's what you want? and to get the extra range and the extra money. So those would really be the key, how can I say, metrics for looking at it. But Stuart's absolutely correct. You've got to take the WLTP numbers with a pinch of salt and factor in something both for winter and summer driving that reduces them by an amount that is appropriate.
I certainly, I just didn't. I just saw the 200, and I do a regular journey that's 185 miles or 180 miles, about 4 or 5 times a month for work. And I just thought, well, that's fine because that's my 200 miles. But quite clearly, in the early years of this, in the early months of this year, I was having to stop to charge. But it didn't really bother me either because it was a 20-minute stop to charge up enough to get home. It gave me a bit of time out from driving. You just sit there, just look at your phone or, do whatever. And I actually don't mind it. It actually sort of chills you out before you then get to work, kind of thing, sort of charging before work. So I'd leave earlier, assuming that people would be less likely to charge at my destination nearby in the morning rather than on the way home, charging on the way home kind of thing. So it works okay. And saving myself £20 on that particular journey, what's not to like, especially with the peace of mind of a 7-year warranty, which was complete opposite to the roulette wheel of driving my 80,000 mile diesel Mercedes and wondering when the next £2,000 bill was going to come in. So it's complete peace of mind. It was until Friday anyway, but that's another matter.
And we all know in that 20 minutes when you're sitting, Stuart, our other colleague, Sean Cullen, in that 20 minutes, he goes for a snack, as he's often commented upon. So as do I. Yeah, and you can afford it as well. You can actually eat better because you're saving more money on that journey as well. Yeah,
you can actually park outside a M&S BP charging station, and you can upgrade your food as well and still be saving money.
And use the toilet. Yes.
Unless it's a service station, because they're still rip-offs, so you might not still be able to afford it anyway.
Yeah, good point.
I'm going to big up our other colleague, Stuart Wright here. I stumbled across the useful MG EV information tab with articles and frequently asked questions by accident only this week when I was looking through the forum. If you've got any questions about the MG, I strongly recommend that. Stuart's taking the time to index it all. So if you're, and that's why I said to you, Mike, we'll come back to the heater subject. There is actually a thread there, and Stuart shortcut it. So just click on that, and it will take you through to the appropriate parts of previous podcasts, etc. So it's a really great piece of work he's done there. Thank you very much for that, Stuart. And I wish I'd seen that before, but I'm still very much in love with my car. And the breaking news is I'm only 2 volts away from full residual voltage miles. I'm getting there. Yeah. And one of the things I saw a recent thread on was, what car did you switch from? And that's really getting quite a lot of traction. I think we're on to about 3 or 4 pages. I had 4 Seats, one after the other. And I actually think there's quite a lot of similarity between the ZS EV, and the Attica and the Alteas that I had before that. But don't regret the move, although I must admit I did love my Seats. Stuart, you had a Mercedes, didn't you?
Yeah, I had about 6 and 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but again, don't regret it until last Friday. But yeah, I just haven't got a problem. I got over the badge thing.
Yeah.
And I actually actively promote the car to people that ask me about it because I can't fault it really.
Yeah, I often say to everybody, EV driving and the MG's not for everybody, but for a certain amount of people, definitely is. It's a real tick in the box. Mike, what did you have before? Have you mentioned that before?
So I had a Ford Fiesta diesel before. So yeah, it was a very, very dirty car in terms of what it produced out the back, and often I didn't wash it, so it was dirty on the outside as well. And I was cheap as well back then, so I had a white one, so it really showed up the dirt.
Yeah, shame. And John, you've had every car known to man, so I'll not ask you.
Yeah. I came to the most expensive country in the world to, oh well, anyway, at least in Europe, and had a love for cars. So it's cost me an arm and a leg. So it's very nice at the moment to buy something that is nice and you don't pay any VAT on it. So I'm getting something back out of it. But no, I wouldn't go back to a fossil car. That's it now. So I do actually really enjoy driving the MG. I think the sunroof is fantastic.
And I think, Miles, it was a Trabant that you had first, wasn't it?
Not quite. No, I've never had a Trabant. I've had a Yugo 45. I've had a Lada Niva. That was very early on. That was 20 odd years ago. I've since had an awful lot of also terrible cars. So various Vauxhall Fronteras. I've had quite a few Fiats, a few Alphas. I've had Audi, I've had Mercedes, I've had I had a Range Rover V8, one of the old P38 Range Rover 4-litre V8s. I put in £100 a week of petrol into that, and I wasn't even driving that far. So I think it was averaging 16 to the gallon, I think. So and that was back when fuel price
started it, did it?
And that's back when fuel was like less than £1 a litre as well. So now it'd be costing me like close to £130 a week. Sorry. I've had a lot of truly terrible cars. I've had a couple of nice ones. The nicest ones have been more recently, and have been electric. My wife went from a diesel Fiat 500L to a Hyundai Ioniq hybrid to a Jaguar I-Pace, and then to an MG ZS EV. So and she actually says she likes the MG ZS EV probably more than she did the I-Pace.
Okay.
Because it does a lot more things than the Jag did, because we had the Jaguar I-Pace S, so it was entry level, so it didn't even have heated seats, didn't have the panoramic roof, it didn't have the lane keep assist, it didn't have speed controlling, radar controlled speed, cruise control and things like that. So really for what was a £65,000 car, it didn't have an awful lot of features. We didn't buy it, by the way, we just rented it for a few months. But the MG ZS EV she really likes. She likes the glass panoramic roof. She likes the seating position. She likes the heated seats in winter. She likes the boot, the way that it's laid out. It seems it's not as much of a reach. In the I-Pace was quite a reach over the bumper to get into the back of the boot. And with her being a community nurse, she's got an awful lot of stuff that she has to keep in the boot and fetch out all the time. So the ZS works better for that. There's a couple of things she wants me to improve on it. She'd like me to fit the boot opening by remote control, the motorized boot opener. So that's something I'm going to consider. And she'd like the roof to be, and mirrors to be wrapped in black to make it look a bit more stylish. So I might treat her for that.
Okay.
But, if I can get a mate to do it for cheap.
Yorkshireman?
I'll see if I can get a guy from work to do it a bit cheaper, you know what I mean?
Oh.
But no, in terms of the car, she really likes that, and it's probably one of the nicest cars she feels that she's had. I think overall we're very, very happy with our MGs, and we'll continue to be so.
Great. Well, just before I come back to Mike for the last look at the board, because we're fast running out of time. Stuart, you've had a bit of a less than enjoyable experience this week. Do you want to give us a quick heads up on that?
Just quickly, when I needed to charge on Friday to get home, I had 60 miles to travel with 30 miles range. So popped into a GeniePoint charger in Morrison's in Wincanton in Somerset. I put it on the charger, plugged in. I've got credit on the app. Pressed the start button to start charge now. Did the 120-second countdown. and it was kind of like the longest 2 minutes because it just times out. Tried again. I've had this problem before with the GeniePoint in Oxfordshire, and it never took a charge on the car. But I moved on to another one not too far away without any stress. So anyway, I tried to move off of this after a couple of attempts and unplugged, and then went to start the car to move off the parking spot because there was yet another brand of charger about 2 miles away. So obviously I'd have had to go through all the fuss of getting the app and everything else, but I went to reverse off. I went to start the motor, and it came up with system fault on the first message on the dash, followed by HV battery shut off, which then meant a couple of phone calls to GeniePoint to see if they could do anything about it, because I felt as though the car was fine before I got there. We tried to recharge the car on 2 occasions after giving a 10-minute rest in between as well. Tried everything, getting out the car, locking it, unplugging it, and all the things you could imagine you do when you reboot your phone at home. Unfortunately, needed to call the MG assistance on the AA. I phoned the dealer, and he'd never heard of it before, the sales guy. Phoned the AA. They came to me within an hour, I think. I think the AA patrol guy learned more from me about my car than he knew before he got there. He called a couple of colleagues across the region for any advice. No problem. No feedback from them. He did plug in the diagnostic thingy into the underneath the steering wheel, and he said MG haven't supplied AA with any data or like the fault codes, so there were no fault codes that came up, so he couldn't explore anything. So we tried all sorts. Well, he tried all sorts of things from, undoing the battery, the 12-volt battery. Still didn't work. Somebody put on the forum actually over the last couple of days about unplugging it and leaving it for 10 minutes before reconnecting it, but he didn't leave it for 10 minutes. Had the car recovered some hours later. I had a nice 04 Reg Mondeo to drive home as their loan car from the garage, which was a Mondeo diesel LX with about 85,000 miles on it, with no sat nav to get home from somewhere where I didn't know where I was. Because it was the AA basically had contacted a local contractor to bring me home. They didn't have enough drivers to take me all the way home, so they were dropping it to MG over the weekend. Wasn't a problem. Got home eventually about 10:30 after an early finish, unfortunately. Then the fun and games started with the hire car, because Enterprise are the contractors for AA to supply a loan car while my car was being sorted out. And I was expecting a phone call, got the phone call to be told, this is Saturday morning, that we can't give you a car until Monday lunchtime. Is that okay? To which I obviously answered, no, it's not okay, and I need the car today. And somehow managed to rustle up a car from another bigger branch in Southampton. Got there. I've got a nice Toyota CHR, which it's a hybrid, and it's horrid.
Well, so we'll
currently
off you next week and see how this rolls out. Just
quickly, call from the MG dealer today. Left a message, phoned them back. Can you tell me what the problem is? I thought that AA would have possibly sent a report to them so they'd know, and all they knew was the car was dumped to them.
That's
that. But yeah, I don't know whether it's to do with the charger, the car, both of them. Have no idea. But I know Stuart's put a poll on the forum. It would be interesting to see if anybody's had any problems with GeniePoint, because this is my second issue. The first one was they just didn't charge and I just left it. This one I tried to charge it and my car's now messed up.
I had a similar, so I was going to say I had a similar thing with a Kia Niro at one of our chargers, an Alpha Power charger, and it wouldn't start a charge. It basically ticked through and then just cut off, and it was because there's a slight looseness in the connection. So holding the CCS whilst it did the handshaking thing. So you hold it tight against the car whilst it's doing the handshake, and then it started the charge, and then you were able to release and it's carried on charging. But actually, if you didn't hold it in, it would basically sort of time down and then just go click, can't connect. Didn't brick the car like yours has, but it did fail to charge several times. So I wonder if perhaps it's, I don't know if it could be a tolerance of 0.5 millimeter or something that's just causing a poor connection on one of the pins, and that's what's created the fault in that case. But
we'll get an update from you next week, will we? Sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, but it's definitely in there overnight tonight. They actually asked me another question this afternoon as well, which was what kind of charge were you doing? Well, it was a CCS, but I guess I don't know how relevant that was for the technician, but apparently he's on it, so we shall see.
Well, the difference between CCS charging and AC charging is that the AC charge uses the onboard charger, whereas CCS goes direct to the battery. So the different ECU controls the charging on CCS versus a slow charge.
Right.
So that's the reason why I'll need to know that.
You'll be an expert on it next week, Stuart. You'll be our go-to man.
I don't think so.
Mike, very briefly, anything you could pick up on, please?
Stuart's put a few links to various forum posts, so have a click on them, see where, can comment on them. Also, a fair few posts about what card they previously have.
Oh, good.
One person did have, Barry had an e-Niro when he sold it to get MG ZS EV, and he said, he lost 100 miles range, but he saved 10 grand, and he's also got blind spot monitoring as well. So bonus for that. And
maybe one more.
A few people want to retrofit the ZS to include a bigger battery. Take the battery out and put a 5 battery in there.
Yeah, I don't see the cost stacking up for that. The actual act of taking the battery out and the labour charge involved would run a couple of grand as it is, and then the battery pack on top would be expensive. So even if you did some sort of part exchange system where you got money back from your battery and you put in a bigger one, even assuming that they were compatible in terms of connections and voltages and all that sort of thing, I think you're probably looking at sort of 7 grand probably to put in a new battery. I think that overall, if you were to wait 12 months, I think you may get some news from this from MG that there's a bigger battery ZS coming anyway.
Okay.
Great. Well, interesting video on, is it all chart that UK guy does videos of electric cars, and he done one where they've swapped out batteries on the older Leafs for the bigger batteries, but they are batteries that they've sourced from all over Europe from crashed cars, and I think it's up in the £6,000 to £7,000 range, possibly a bit more, but they're basically doubling the range of the car, because it might be down to 90 miles with a degraded battery. So, the best bet is for MG to increase the battery size, and we'll part exchange or once the leases go out, as in our case, we get another one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys, we're going to have to wrap it up, I think. Sorry, John, we're going to have to wrap it up. We're getting quite close to Stuart's Horlicks time, so before we go, there's a few things I want to bring to everybody's attention. Please look at our merchandise. There's a link to the shop in the forum menu, and Mike, our resident MG male model, is demonstrating. Stand up again, please, Mike. Oh, even better. As I said, we're running that poll on YouTube about range, so please, it's on the community tab. Click on that, and we can gather more information. Finally, if you'd like to support us, please consider the MG EVs Forum Premier membership. For just £3 a month, it gives you a Premier membership badge, the ability to upload a profile banner, the ability to select the MG red theme, a 10% discount code for MG EV merchandise, and the pleasure that of knowing that you're supporting us for both the website and the podcast. I thank you for joining our new Premier member, Goofy. Thank you. And lastly, to Jennifer in Tasmania, we look forward to seeing you again soon. Get well and take good care of yourself. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and thanks to our podcasters, Stuart Whitman.
See ya.
Mike Fisher.
Good night, all.
John Griffiths, just outside Oslo.
Good night, everybody.
And again, another big thanks to Miles.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Cheers.
And then thank you again to the unseen Stuart Wright, who's working feverishly in the background to ensure all these things happen, and for his continued work during the week. We'll be back next week, usual time for 7:30. Sorry for overrunning a bit, but it was good chat tonight. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.